Don't buy Russian narratives when the Russians say that sanctions are useless. It is not true. Look at the Russian economy. Look at the Russian export of ammunition. It's nosediving.
This week was supposed to mark Europe finally coming together to unite behind a plan to use frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine buy arms. But no plan came from the leaders' meetings on Wednesday, and an agreement for the US to sell long-range arms to Ukraine is also not forthcoming. And I have to say that the former Prime Minister of Ukraine, Arseniy Yatseniuk, has just wandered into the studio. Thank you very much for joining us.
Such a pleasure, Kathy.
And slightly
At
earlier
least we
than
have
expected.
a chance to meet in person.
Exactly. And, you know, when I came to Ukraine, we weren't able to meet in person.
Correct.
So this is great to meet you in London. You said very recently that words matter only in one case if they're supported by actions. So what level of faith do you have now that the US, that the EU will do what they say and curb Russia's aggression?
Well, it is not about my faith or my trust. It is about whether the EU and the US want to win this fight, the fight of democracies against the dictators and tyrants. And these dictators, they are closely following what kind of actions will be undertaken by the free world. You've just mentioned the Russian frozen assets. I'm going to tell you that the budget gap for Ukraine, we estimate around $170 billion in the forthcoming 3 years. It is a staggering number. And I do understand that you guys are facing tremendous economic problems, but you can't even imagine what's happening in Ukraine, okay?
Yes, it's off the scale.
Absolutely. And for every government, it is hard toil to convince their taxpayers to give money to Ukraine. But my message is that you are not donating this money to Ukraine. You are contributing in your own security. We are fighting for ourselves, that's true, but we are defending you.
So top of your list of requests is to use those frozen assets, not just the interest from them, but use the assets themselves, unfreeze them.
And that's what I am trying actually to deliver this kind of message that, look, we are facing this huge deficit, but we have the source how to cover this deficit. And this is the Russian sovereign assets. And there is an ongoing talk shop among my beloved European friends, whether it's legal or illegal. Give me a break. Russia has violated blatantly the international law. Russia committed an act of aggression against Ukraine. And we need to bring Russia to justice.
But is there a squeamishness about, you know, Russia has obviously invaded illegally. If we then illegally share those assets to help you with your financial situation, are we somehow sort of reducing ourselves to Russia's level? Answer that sort of allegation.
Yeah, I will give you a very clear answer. Last year, together with the former Secretary of Treasury, Larry Summers, Zelik and Zelikov, a prominent Americans and Brits, we published an article in FT clearly stating that there is a clear-cut legal ground how to confiscate sovereign Russian assets.
Right.
Under the UN Charter, it is called countermeasures.
Right.
As the Russia has violated UN Charter, so there is a countermeasure, and justice must be served, period.
Right, so get on with it is your message to the EU.
And there are a number of different and other ways. Look, I am the former lawyer, and, you know, lawyers are very creative. But that's not about creation. It is about justice, whether we are ready to bring Russia to account.
Right. And so you've been very blunt then with the EU. Apply that same straight talking to the US when it comes to proper sanctions. What would you say to Donald Trump, who's at the moment making it dependent on the EU stopping buying Russian oil, which we'll come on to in a moment?
So I believe the best way is to act in concert. I mean, both Americans and Europeans. This would be the best action plan, and this would be the strongest signal to Putin that there is no fissures between the US and the European Union. And the effectiveness of this kind of action will be higher. Look, Russia has still managed to circumvent sanctions. Russia is still getting around $130 billion per year from the hydrocarbons directly into the budget. This is the budget revenues. But I don't buy Russian narratives when the Russians say that sanctions are useless. It is not true. Look at the Russian economy. Look at the Russian export of ammunition. It's nosediving.
Yeah, but it would be far far more useful if the EU stopped buying Russian oil and gas.
Look, the EU has done a lot. So the EU win itself by 80% from the dependence of on the Russian gas and oil, and there are another 20%. And a very close ally of designated war criminal Putin, Prime Minister Orban.
Well, I was about to bring him up. The Hungarian.
Yeah, he has just to stop buying. He has urgently to stop investing into the Russian war machine.
Yeah, but I mean,
he's liable.
He's your main problem, though, isn't he? Because he said
he is not the only one problem,
EU,
Kathy.
Well, let me just put this one problem to you. The EU is not at war with Russia, is what he said. He's accused Donald Tusk of playing a dangerous game with European lives. What do you say to him?
Yeah, I can tell to him that it is true that the EU is not at war with Russia. Neither NATO is at war with Russia. There is only one problem. Russia is at war with NATO and the European Union and Ukraine.
Yeah.
So this is the truth.
You can't pick your fight. I feel like you've rather let Donald Trump off the hook here, though. You've been very blunt with the EU. Fair enough. But what do you say to Donald Trump?
Look, I'm heading to DC.
Right. So what are you going to say there?
I have to be on the one hand cautious, but on the other hand, look, telling you frankly, we desperately need Americans on board. Just desperately. And I don't want to give any kind of excuse to the US administration to jump off board.
Right.
And the reason why is very clear, because Americans are the biggest producers of ammo in the world. So I hope that the time will come when Ukraine is to get a security and another additional security supplemental. And there were some kinds rumors hovering around the city that Americans are deliberating over the option whether to supply Ukraine long-range missiles. I hope it's not just a hot air. At least something has to come out of this.
Right.
But the thing that Donald Trump made a U-turn, a verbal U-turn during the UNGA, it is a positive sign, but this sign has to be underpinned by action.
Well, just finally, returning to Putin himself, who's threatened to attack Ukrainian nuclear stations. He's accused Kyiv of shelling around the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. How concerned are you that a cornered Vladimir Putin could lash out and do something catastrophic?
Well, he always resorts to his outdated politics of nuclear cyber rattling. And we're used to this. It is a bluff because neither China nor the US will never allow Russians to use nukes. But the thing is that Putin definitely wants to freeze Ukraine. So he's ready to strike, and he did it in the last 3 years. His plan is to strike Ukraine's energy facilities and to make a huge both blackout and freeze out for Ukraine for the next winter. That's the reason why we desperately need anti-aircraft and anti-missile systems, and we need both defensive and offensive weapons, and we need very strong and bold actions on the side of our European and American allies. Security supplemental, secondary sanctions, financial support, military support, pressure on China, and somehow to get along with India in order to wean India of the Russian dependence on carbs and actually to deprive Russia of this huge flow of cash that is Russia getting into its state coffers.
Well, you couldn't put it more clearly than that. Arseniy Yatseniuk, thank you very much for coming into the studio to set out your asks for the EU and next the US. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
That was the former Prime Minister of Ukraine, Arseniy Yatseniuk. Great to have him in the studio, face to face, rather than down the line on a crackly Zoom line.